Good morning, people. Good morning, people of the world. What a frosty day it is today in the beautiful northeast town of Durham, city of Durham, County Durham. Wonderful here. Just been out with the dog, and it's lovely and icy and kind of cold. And one of those kind of nice, kind of bracing mornings where you can go out and be bracing, really, I suppose. Let me just sort some bits and pieces out here so I can see what I'm doing. I hope you're all right. I mean, you've been completely neglected by me, let's be honest, but I have not been wasting my time. Morning, Peter Wright. I hope it's beautiful and frosty and wonderful in the other wonderful northern town of Leeds, although not as far north as Durham. Now then, are my books, Peter Wright, are my books actually backwards? Because what happened last week, and Pete pointed out this hilarity, was that I said I'm going to flick my screen around because my books are backwards. And they weren't backwards, but they looked backwards to me. Now then, here's the interesting thing. They look right to me today. I think there's some strange configuration thing going on with my wonderfully expensive camera that seems to turn things around. So to me, they're the right way. Do you know what? I'm just going to leave them. You could kind of figure out kind of what's going on with them, and maybe you might have to try harder to read what's on the spines, or you could tune into my On the Shelf, Stephen Mordew's On the Shelf. On the Social Work Shorts channel, although it's good for everybody, while I talk through my bookshelves. So they look right to me. I suppose when I save this and have a look, we'll see what happens. So yes, so Pete poked fun at me because my books were the right way around, and then so I swapped them because I thought they were the wrong way around. Anyway. Yes, do that. But yes, you sort it out at your end. Why should everything be laid at my feet to sort out for the world? Do you know what I mean? Tell you what. Yes, put your phone or whatever you're watching us on in front of the mirror to get it the right way around. Anyway, enough of this idle banter. Here we go. So last week I only managed to check in with you once. Huge apologies. But I wasn't wasting my time. I was reading books and the like and doing things, as you could imagine, and I was becoming absorbed in a couple of books. One by a guy called Gabor Mate. I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing that right. I've only ever read the guy's name. I've never heard it said. It's Gabor, that's his first name, and his second name is Mate, Mate, maybe. And I think it's got one of them inflection things above the E, I think, if you see him printed. And his book, The Myth of Normal, is one of the ones that I'm listening to as an audiobook. And the other one I'm reading is a book called Breath, and by a guy called Nesta. And that's really fascinating. Turns out I've been breathing wrong all my life. You would think, wouldn't you, that it's not difficult because, one of the things I often say when I'm trying to make the point in some of my presentations about the fact that a lot of our mind, our body, our functions are outside of our control because they're part of that automatic system. I often say, because I read it somewhere, we don't breathe, we are being breathed, because seldom do we think about our breath. But that got me thinking, reading the book and thinking about that got me thinking, because I remember when me and Christine first got together many moons ago, long time ago. Luke's 21, so it's before that. When we got together, we'd be lying in bed and she'd say, "You don't have to breathe fast." And I thought, well, that's just how I breathe. That's what's normal for me. That's just how I breathe. And as you might know, if you've listened to me before, I also suffer from hypertension, high blood pressure, to a point where, when this happened, and I went to see the doctors and the nurses, wonderful people at my local surgery, my local GP surgery. They were like, "Well, you're a bit overweight, you're drinking a bit much, and you're drinking a bit much coffee. But even if you put all of those things right, that's not going to. All of those things will bring your systolic rate, is that the top one? Bring your systolic rate down by maybe 5 points or so, and that's still going to get us nowhere near where it should be for your safe and continue life. So I'm on medication for high blood pressure. But what's interesting, and in the Myth of Normal book, Gabe Amate's book, he talks about the fact that when we go and see the doctor, wonderful as doctors are, they ask us about physical things. Yeah, I mean, maybe this is changing as well, but they ask us about physical things. They take our blood pressure and take our heart rate, and and take all those things. But seldom with any of these conditions do they say what's going on in your life. I mean, I must admit, when I went with my high blood pressure problem to the GPs after having it discovered during a pre-assessment visit for a little hernia up I needed, minor thing, years ago. When that was discovered, the doctor did say, looked at me right away. She said, "Well, you're a social worker," because I was at that point in time. I was just about to transition into being a lecturer. Well, you're a social worker, so that's stressful, isn't it? And that was it. That was all it was. That was the sum total of the acknowledgement of the environment I was working in, and the physical impact of that environment. Now, I'm not going to lie, because there are some social workers who have listened to this as well, because of my social work shorts connection, and I honestly think from talking to them that it's even more stressful now than it was when I was doing this. Which is why I'm interested. That's why I got interested in all this stuff. I don't know if you only catch up with me on here about the self-care stuff. The reason I got interested in that was because of the profession I'm in, and because of the levels of burnout and stress and often depression that exist in that profession. Anyway, so that's why I got interested in it, and but also in exploring that, what comes to light, two things, is that physical and mental and emotional connection, and that connection between all of those things. The physical manifestation of what's going on as a consequence of our environment manifests itself as emotions, and that then kind of manifests itself, doesn't it, as mental well-being or mental ill-being, I suppose. I hesitate to use the word, mental ill health, because I think we need some sort of differentiation, and that's a huge debate, isn't it, between mental health problems that end up with people being on medication and in hospital and all those kind of things, acute things, and the mental well-being problems that many of us experience on a day-to-day basis. And I think there's a continuum there, isn't there? Mental health at one end, mental well-being at the other end, and in the middle it probably all crosses over somewhere where it becomes a bit murky. Where is this something that needs medical intervention, because those kind of things can help, or where does it need kind of the sort of interventions that I would talk about, the kind of everyday sort of interventions that might help? But anyway, so in the Myth of Normal, there are a couple of really interesting observations, a couple of little models, I suppose, or little tales that kind of help us think about this. And one is that he talks about the Petri dish. The little thing that in science where you put some sort of organism in a Petri dish and you watch whether it grows and expands, or you watch whether it doesn't. And what he says in the book is, Gabe Amati says in the book, is if something's amiss in the Petri dish, in the environment that the culture is trying to grow in, it doesn't grow. And in fact, sometimes it dies, or it just doesn't grow. It just, it sits there in a state of kind of, just existingness, really. It just sits there. It doesn't thrive and grow and establish itself as a culture, as an organism, broader organism in that Petri dish. And he says that, us as individuals, we exist in a social and emotional context from which ill health ensues, and he says that chronic illness is seems to be just a function of the way things are these days, a consequence of how we live. I suppose not how we live, but how we're asked to live, capitalism, etc. The modern world, this is a direct quote from the modern world, he says, generates illness. I think that's really important. And then he goes on to give another analogy, which I think is fascinating. And he says there are two young fish swimming on a morning, just going about their daily business. And they go past an elder fish. And the elder fish shouts over, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" and they acknowledge him and swim on. And then eventually one of the younger fish turns to the other younger fish and says, "What the hell's water?" They're so absorbed in the water. The water is just such a normal function, normal part of their world, that they've stopped seeing the water as being of any consequence, And I really do kind of believe that that's kind of where we're at in this modern world. There's a few things. Been a few conversations when I've been doing my face-to-face and online kind of training, for want of a better way of putting it, around this kind of thing. There's been a couple of things that have been said kind of lately about this, I suppose. And one of them that struck me last week was, we were talking about mobile phones and mobile phone use, and I was saying, who switches their phone into airplane mode or puts focus on through the day, And nobody in the room, apart from me, said that they did that. And one of the women in the room, a parent of children, said, "Well, I know, but the school need to be able to get in touch with me." And I thought, there in a nutshell, and this is not a criticism of her at all, because I think everybody who's a parent, particularly of smaller children, younger children, can relate to that. I have to have my phone on in case the school need to ring me. And my response to that was, well, yeah, I get that. And that's what the schools are doing now. But what I would say is they're offloading responsibility onto us. Because when I went to school, as a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old, Dad was at work. He had no way to contact him. My mom might have been in the house, but for a period of time, we had no phone. No house phone. This is before the days of the ubiquitous nature of house phones, never mind mobile phones. But then she might not have been in, and she would have been out the shop. She could have been doing anything. So she wouldn't necessarily be able to answer the phone. And what schools used to do then was and one other fella in the room remembered this. You used to get took to the nurse's office and laid down on a bed, and the school nurse, who maybe even wasn't a nurse really, the school nurse used to look after you until the end of the day, when your parents would come and pick you up, because the school were responsible for you. And this is one of these things, isn't it? One of these things that's come with this neoliberal agenda, to get a bit of political ideology in there. One of these things that's come with this neoliberal agenda is, you are responsible. Well, no, you know what I mean? I think we need to start saying no to the environment that's being created. Because if you're working all day, that's really important. And I remember even when my children were young, I remember being able to drop Luke off at school, particularly being able to drop Luke off at school and think, right, that's that. I can now get on with the bit that I need to do, which is go to work, be available to people, be a social worker. I can now go and do that. And whether it's the reality of the world or not, we are now existing in a world where that child still remains my responsibility, even though I've handed responsibility over to the school. And that's how it should be, I think. We're cooperative beings. We cooperate. And there are cultures where children are raised in group settings, where groups look after children, and it does the children a power of good. So there are all sorts of models for this. But we find we're living in an environment where everything is pushed back onto us. And it's even things like your car tax, or booking a holiday, or doing whatever, or ordering your medication online. All these kind of things, which appear on the surface to be really, really useful and helpful, mean all of the pressure of making sure we get it right is on us. It's all on us. It's being pushed back to us. And while some of these things are really useful, I find it really useful to be able to just pop online and order me medication that I need for my hypertension whenever I'm getting to the end of that. I don't have to rely on anybody else. Sometimes it's nice to be self-reliant. If you think about holidays, which should be a wonderfully relaxing experience, or you think about the insurance for your car, which has got to be right, the pressure of making sure that's right is being passed on to us. And that's only one of the things that I feel is causing this environmental shift where we end up generating ill health, ill mental health, which then generates ill physical health. Yeah, because the two things are so inextricably linked. So I thought that those are the things that struck me from the book. Oh yeah, well, the other book, I haven't even mentioned the other book yet, is the book's Breath. And we're getting breathing all wrong, apparently. Who would have thought? Whole book on breath. And it really is worth a read. But to me, it strikes me that that's one of those things that sometimes we do things in a way that we haven't even been told that that's the way to do it. We've just developed this. Nobody's ever told me how to breathe. Breathe shallow, breathe deep, breathe fast, breathe slow. But I've developed that, and without some knowledge around that, it's hard to see how we ever kind of turn that over, really. So there's loads of advice in the book. I'm not going to tell you what it is, because I might get it wrong, and then you might go off and not breathe for an hour or something, and then blame me. But no, breathing slower is the thing. Breathing less, interestingly. Breathing through your nose, all those kind of things. Really interesting book. And it's something that, and he makes the point, the chapter I was reading this morning makes the point that actually these things have been well known to cultures and some faith systems that rely on almost meditative kind of approaches to life. He was talking about the rosary. I don't know the rosary. There's some thing in the Catholic Church where the priest says something, and then the people say something, then the priest says something, the people say something. And what that does, he says, and one of the reasons that might be helpful to people, is it means people take a long breath in, because they've then got to do their bit next. But like singing, they've got to do their bit next. Then while they're doing their bit, they breathe out slowly as they do their bit. And about 5.5 to 6 seconds, I think it takes for each element of that, purely by chance. But people probably figured out it was just good. And it's the same with breathing in for meditation, Buddhism, that kind of thing, you know. So there's all sorts of examples of it. So you're breathing all wrong, and you need to switch your mobile phone off. But you know, these things create a kind of a toxic environment, I suppose. So yeah, there you go. Was worth it, wasn't it? It was worth the wait to get that, whatever that was. But I think, you know, we need to think about, again, that word ubiquitous comes to mind, you know, everywhere. This ubiquitous and the obvious realities that we live in that are there in plain sight, but we don't observe and we don't spot. And sometimes the way we live our lives, so it's not just our fault, but the way we live our lives within those environments that are created externally to us, the way we go about living our lives, is having a negative impact on us. And actually, we can choose not to do that. We can choose to switch our phone off, even if it's just for an hour at a time or whatever, and then put it back on and check it if that's what you feel you have to do. But there's something about generating ourselves still, quiet, calm moments to get on with whatever we need to get on with, which I think is really, really important. The best, I'll finish with this. I did a half marathon yesterday. It was torture. Well, it wasn't torture. The last 3 miles was torture. But the thing that I love about running is I can't really think about very much. I just run, and I don't think about anything, and that's really important. Switching our minds off so that our minds are all the better for us to get engaged in things we need to use our minds for. So take care. I'll see who's texting me. All right, take care, and I'll hopefully see you on Wednesday. Bye now.